Creep stories from real life, in which no one believes, were voiced by Max Post. I was left alone at home, looking at the living room TV. Suddenly, I hear the voice of my brother Kurt, who was calling for help. The sound came from above, apparently from the attic. I get up from the sofa, go to check and find the source. To my surprise, it sounds like a recording on an old cassette player hidden in a drawer. It was obviously made many years ago. Kurt claims he doesn't remember it. My brother wanted to take his hand, otherwise he will fall off the cliff into the river. Light in the attic vs behind bright and off. And I almost broke my leg, getting out of there in the dark. Driven by terror, he ran out into the yard, sat on the driveway, until his parents returned home. 2 years later, I forgot about this situation. But a week ago, Kurt and I went hiking, where he fell off a cliff into the river. The brother begged for help and asked for a hand. I didn't have time to grab him, and only yesterday, Kurt was found in a neighboring town. The body was carried by the current. The most terrible thing is that the voice, intonation, words all exactly repeated the recording on the cassette. I stayed at home in the company of an old pit bull, my roommate's dog, named Hamburger. The dog is very cute, calm, but always barked at strange sounds, or if he heard something outside the house. Sometimes he gave out a slight growl, and a few soft squeals if he noticed a mouse. Rare, but quite acceptable. It is quite an old home. Anyway, it was late, about 3 in the morning, and I went to rest in my room when Hamburger started barking. Usually I quickly order, "Hey, buddy, stop making noise." These words could have silenced the dog, but not this time. It became clear to me that really pissed her for real. Going out into the corridor, I looked at the dog. Hamburger was sitting on the threshold of the living room, staring in my direction, but past me. I turned back to where the dog was looking, but I didn't see anything. It was dark everywhere, except for a small section of the corridor where the light from my room reached. I looked back at the dog, and she whined piteously for a second, meeting an invisible enemy, which had never been observed before. I wasn't afraid of the pit bull at all, and remembered that he never harmed me. But now he recoiled a little to the side, feeling fear. I stood motionless, pressing against the wall, until the dog walked a couple of feet past me to the end of the corridor, continuing to bark aggressively. Hamburger doesn't look like a fighting dog at all. He never showed aggression, so it scared me a lot. Strange behavior of the dog. And it definitely wasn't caused by a mouse, because the dog was looking with his head raised to about the height of a human. I went into the living room, turned on the light, and sat on the sofa, because I considered it the best way out of an unpleasant situation. It was nice, bright and safe here, far from the end of the corridor. She called to her dog, and he sat down next to the couch, silently snarling in the next few minutes. When I finally calmed down completely, and was no longer worried, I decided to go to my room to go to bed. Hamburger refused to accompany me, just silently watched me go. Later that night, I woke up to a strange feeling. It seemed to me that in the room there is a stranger. I swear, when I opened my eyes, I really saw a ghost. It looked like a teenage girl, in a white dress, frozen motionless at the foot of my bed. But here's the paradox. Hamburger didn't sleep either. He sat and looked at the ghost girl. And then I lost consciousness and switched off. I didn't even understand what really happened. The saddest thing is that the next day I didn't find it. The hamburger has been missing ever since. Together with my sister in adolescence, we often played with the Ouija board, asking all the important questions about the boys we liked. One day my father caught us doing this difficult task, accidentally looking into our room. He crossed the threshold and came closer. He stood for a while watching what was happening, then began to mock us, claiming that one of us was cheating. He noticed how his daughter herself was moving the Ouija board with her hand to pick it up. The right answers. We looked at each other resentfully, then in two voices together protested, refuting what was said. So Dad decided to ask us a question that we probably couldn't have known the answer. He narrowed his eyes mysteriously, grinned, and suggested the following. Ask your spirit which patronymic is acceptable. A longtime family friend, who now lived in another state, often visited our house. And although his name was Robert, His comrades from childhood addressed him by the name of Stub. Of course, we didn't know his middle name. A tricky question was asked, and large letters followed one after another on the surface. Emil, that was the right answer. My father stood in silence for a while, digesting what he saw. Then he made us immediately throw away the Ouija board. I bought a Christmas-themed gift. An ordinary microphone. You can press a button in it, and it turned on the radio of the North Pole. Had different sound effects and so on. If you hold down the button and speak into it, then when the recording is played, the pitch will be quite high, and the voice will sound like a drunken chipmunk. One day I stayed at home with my daughter. At that time, the baby was 6 months old. While cleaning the room in the nightstand, I noticed the same microphone. I wanted to play. My daughter paid no attention to my occupation, so I speak loudly into the microphone, trying to get her to look at me. Then I try to reproduce my voice, and instead of going silent at the end of the recording, something started talking there. I swear it. After a short pause, a strange voice sounded. I heard only one clearly pronounced word in the vague noise surrounding me. That was my name. And as previously reported, the pitch should increase. But this voice sounded in a hollow, threatening tone, penetrating very deeply into my consciousness. I reacted instantly, just freaked out from what I heard, and threw the microphone out into the street. On the same day, I called my boyfriend and asked him to come home early. Today, my heart sank into my heels again. After all, going through the Christmas decorations, I found the same microphone again. There was only one recording on it, a rough male voice repeating mine over and over again. When I was a little kid, strange things happened to me. Often in my room, I talked to invisible adult boy. I played with him and had fun. I have a real friend, whom my parents have always considered imaginary. He was a Native American, a little older than me, probably 8 or 9 years old, and I'm sure a super smart guy. A friend told me various entertaining stories. We played games together. As an adult, I didn't think much about this period of childhood until my nephew was born. My older brother and his family lived in his parents' house for a while their baby was growing up. When the child was about the same age as me earlier, he also had an imaginary friend. Someone told the boy the same stories, played the same games with him. Then there was an episode that made us all realize that the invisible friend really exists. Through my 4-year-old nephew, we heard apologies for the pain caused to me as a child. The ghost was upset that he couldn't protect his little friend from the bad guy. No one knew about it except me. An older boy from our neighborhood climbed into my bedroom window in the evening, took Dandy away, and quickly took off. My boyfriend and I were in the house having dinner. It's always hot in summer, even in the evenings. We left the front door open. Mesh-covered frame. Closes the passage to the hallway. Suddenly there was a noise from outside. It looks like the screen door swung open and immediately slammed shut. The two of them slowly walked into the living room, then returned to the corridor again, making their way to the exit. As soon as we went outside, we were struck on the spot by the thick color. Floral fragrance. Luscious, sickeningly sweet air enveloped both from head to toe. There was a strong smell of funeral flowers right in front of our house. We felt anxious, so we returned to the house, hurrying to our bedroom. She sat on the edge of the big bed, peering intently. Our dog came up and jumped on my lap. My boyfriend and I were thinking about what was going on, why the door was slamming, and where such a disgusting smell came from. During a brief lull in conversation, I looked straight into the hall, so I noticed a black shadow passed by the door of our bedroom, and napped to the end of the corridor where there was a second room. The silhouette that flashed by seemed excessively tall, vaguely resembling a human, and completely black, as if from the place where he was, somehow. Suddenly the light disappeared, and nothing could be seen through it. Our dog also saw a dark figure. The dog was going crazy, barking, growling, and whining at the same time. This behavior is not typical of a good-natured home dismissal. For some reason, what scared me the most was the thought that the night alien had also seen us. I cried and said I wanted to leave the house. So we ran outside, got in the car, took the dog with us, and drove away. The day before, we had a problem with the water supply. We had planned for a while to leave home for repairs. Therefore, the necessary things were in the trunk. In the end, we just stayed in a hotel room on that ill-fated night. When we returned the next day, all inside and outside remained in their places. The situation turned out to be completely normal, and nothing like this has happened since. Definitely one of the scariest moments I've ever experienced. I'm a truck driver, and sometimes I have to pick up loads from old and creepy places where strange things happen. One day I drove up to a very dilapidated building in a small town in Virginia. While I was waiting for my trailer to load, I went inside to go to the bathroom. Now imagine a very neglected, almost destroyed building erected in the 1860s, which has long served its time. The door to the bathroom was not usual modern team latches. Instead, a loop was arranged and a hook hung that kept the door closed. The curved squiggle was quite stiff. I had to insert it in the right place several times, and it took a lot of effort to finally get into the loop. Finally, he locked the door and stood with his back to her, preparing to relieve his bladder. I am slowly going about my business, and at this moment, there is a loud knock from the back, as if someone is hitting a wooden panel with a fist. I turn my head, answer angrily. The hell is busy here? After that, the knocking continues. There is no break in the brazen fucking. But when I turn to the sink and finish the intimate process, the door suddenly swings open. Not a soul in sight. The hook and loop are still securely bolted to their places. Returning to the dock to my loaded trailer, I asked the guy driving the loader if he had knocked on my bathroom door, to which I received a negative answer. Then he asked if there was anyone else inside. The guy answers categorically again, "No, I don't draw attention to his actions, just out of your incident." Then the two of us climb into the cab of the truck and drive to the landfill. Handing me the documents, my partner says something like, "You did a good job with this task. Trust me, there's a reason I'm the only one who comes to this house and works here to load trucks with junk." It turns out that my questions were far from the first. Many visitors experienced strange experiences in this dilapidated building. My husband and his family and I went on vacation. After a long trip, we camped on the shore of a small lake, located quite far from civilization. In our state of New Mexico, there are always a lot of stories about paranormal phenomena that were found almost everywhere. But this time we witnessed it ourselves. An unusual incident. There were 10 people gathered in our campsite, and another group of vacationers, maybe about 6 people, set up camp on another part of the shore. The day flew by rapidly, evening came. Both one group of tourists and the other quite got used to the unfamiliar. Together they were engaged in typical business at a halt. They cooked snacks, drank various drinks, told stories around the campfire, carelessly whiling away the time before going to bed. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud baby crying. Somewhere in the distance, a little girl screamed, pleading. Vacationers from another area asked if there were any kids among us. But we replied that there were only adults here, and they also rested without children. But everyone present in the two camps was sure that they clearly heard the voice of a little girl who was in trouble. And she needs help. We decided to unite and search the neighborhood together. A large group headed in the direction from which the scream came. Pretty quickly we discovered something. There is a large field behind our camps. And when our squad came out to him, people immediately saw a very strange picture. A tall snow-white figure stood about 100 feet away from us and made plaintive sounds, so similar to a child crying. Everyone froze in place at once, amazed at the sight they saw, discussing the strange situation, as far as it was at all. In such a state of shock, they agreed that this thing looks about 6 feet tall, skinny, white and very suspicious. People quieted down, but having rallied closer, they still decided to come closer to properly understand. The creature finally fell silent, and also began to retreat as we approached it, maintaining the distance between us, until it completely disappeared behind the trees at the edge of the field. Vacationers in both camps were terrified by the night ghost, and until the morning, when they tried to fall asleep, they still continued to hear the screams of a little girl calling for help. Thinking about it, I run goosebumps. Together with my brother, we were in a grocery store, and in one of the aisles, we came across a familiar guy from middle life. Schools. By chance, my brother's best friend turned out to be in front of us. In addition, we were in the same class with him. Everyone greeted each other and chatted a little. At some point in our communication, my brother looked at his watch and began to say goodbye. It was 13:00. Our mutual friend smiled sadly and said, "Yes, indeed, it's time to leave." He was the first to turn around and go to the exit. That evening, around 20:00, my brother got a call from old friends and said that his friend, who had been in a coma for 12 hours, had just died. After this call, my brother looked puzzled. He thought he was being played, since he and I met a live guy 7 hours ago. I got into a car accident while driving at an intersection, but got off with only a strong fright and a dented car door without casualties. About 100 meters before leaving the intersection, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and a man's voice asked me to slow down. Up to this point, the car had already driven several kilometers at a speed below the limit. Because a little girl was sitting in the cabin. Our baby's daughter was 3 years old. She was on the passenger side in the back of the child's seat, and could not touch me through the fixed restraints in any way. Besides, the words were spoken by a man. A couple of minutes later, a sports car suddenly appeared out of nowhere at high speed, and hit the front door on the passenger side. If I had been driving faster at that terrible moment, my child would have taken a terrible blow, and would not have survived. In the confusion, I temporarily forgot about the timely warning about the impending danger, but later, I did not stop thanking the unknown benefactor for saving my daughter. A few days later, my baby, very healthy and intact in a terrible situation, was chirping merrily with someone in her bedroom. I was interested in who was entertaining the girl so well, and went to check. To my question, with whom she communicates, the daughter answered that she was talking to Grandpa K. After a short pause, I looked at her carefully and asked, "Where is he? Do you see him?" And the little girl turned to the side without the slightest hesitation, pointing to the corner of her room. I decided that it was just a child's imagination, and there was no need to worry. On this occasion, he just silently left the nursery. About a week after that, we stayed at my mom's house. Sitting on the sofa in the big hall, the girl said, "Not good. Hey Grandma," Sonny says. "He's sorry that you grew up an orphan. Your parents left too soon, but there he is. Looks after your mom well. Be calm. Grandpa, my mom's dad, he died long before I was born, and Mom never mentioned the names of my father and mother to me, who also died suddenly when I was growing up. Grandpa K's nickname was Sonny. I didn't even know it until my daughter said it out loud in the presence of a speechless grandmother." Our family used to live in a trailer park on wheels. There was a corridor from one end of the trailer to the other. On the one hand, it included door spalin. My bed was against the wall opposite the exit, so I could see the space in front of the door, but not on the sides of the corridor. I was about 6 years old at the time, but I remember my childhood fear well after nightfall. If I didn't manage to fall asleep right away until the moment when my father fell into sound sleep, then came that terrible moment. I lay there and stared into the corridor. Soon the dark eyes began to distinguish the hand to-dos due to the door opening on the right side of the door. The longer I looked, the more the hand moved out. Very slow and hard. Quiet. For several minutes, contemplating someone else's limb, I could not move, shackled by horror. Then I managed to make out a red and white stripe on the sleeve of a sweater, maybe a shirt. If I had continued to look, overcoming my fear, then after a longer time, the body of a boy would have appeared in the doorway. When it happened at night, I couldn't sleep properly. I tried to turn away, but I was looking into the corridor again. I especially remembered how I panicked at the first sight of him and hid under the blanket. Nothing has ever annoyed me more than him slowly moving his face towards my bed from the right side of the door to the left. If I kept looking, he would eventually disappear noiselessly behind the left threshold. We moved from a trailer to our own house when I was 9 years old. And that put an end to the nightmares. I never really thought about it. I didn't tell my father or anyone else, because by that time, I attributed everything to a child's imagination. About 15-20 years later, my father and I were talking about his best friend, who lived in a trailer park next door, but unfortunately, recently passed away. We remembered about our stay in that place, neighbors, including an elderly lady who moved in after us. Dad said something like pretty funny. A few years ago, a friend of mine shared with me a strange story, as if this woman saw a ghost every night. Like a little boy in a red and white shirt, or something like that. And then I realized that it wasn't my imagination, but the real paranormal. There is a haunted road near where I live. Many people have seen the car There Is a Ghost. For the first time, when I personally had a chance to see this, I was driving, and my mother was dozing in the passenger seat. Suddenly, I notice a cloud of dust ahead, and a big old black car with no license plates, leaving the road to my right. I instantly realized that the driver was trying to collide with us. So I hit the brake hard, preventing an accident. I don't even look in front of me, I just put my head on the steering wheel. My car stops. Mom wakes up instantly from a sudden jolt. The black car just disappeared, leaving not a cloud of dust to my right, not a single trace. I'm shaking from the experience of fear. I keep repeating a stupid question. Where did the ill-fated car go? Mom calmed me down and blamed everything on fatigue. 2 months ago, my mother called me in a panic and said that she was being chased by an old black car with no license plates. Since then, no one has seen my parent. We hired a private investigator, posted ads. Cops and volunteers combed our town and several neighboring ones. Nothing. I often drive through the place where I met a black car, but, alas, unsuccessfully. She didn't show up, and neither did my mom. I was 20 years old, and I was left alone in my parents' house, waiting for the return of my loved ones, who went on a trip. My stay under the roof of my native shelter did not imply anything. It's okay. My father and mother had a couple of little whiny dogs who were very attached to their owners, especially to the owner, since they slept with him every night. Now the little ones were restless, refusing to stay in my room and sleep outside my father's bedroom. By about the third night, I couldn't stand their torment and constant plaintive whining, so I decided to go to bed in my parents' room, sitting on the bed with them. In all these years, I've never spent the night there. In childhood, specifically chose the second bedroom, although the former was much more beautiful. Red Lake view. According to my parents, he simply refused to settle in this room for the life of him, without explaining the reason. At about 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up. I was woken up by the soft guttural growling of the dogs, which instantly made the hair on my head stand on end. How is this possible? They're little slurping dogs that bark softly all the time. But now was different. The room was freezing as hell. It's now mid-July in the tropics on plus 35th Street, and even though I was sleeping a dead sleep, I woke up instantly. I just realized that something strange was happening. Both dogs growl continuously, so I roll over, open my eyes a little, and see 2 small children dressed in some vintage baseball uniforms in front of me. In the form in which they appeared, there was nothing terrible. But the feeling of horror that gripped me is almost indescribable in words. The kids just stood there and watched, doing nothing. But somehow I understood that the aliens were dangerous. Whatever it is, it's unknown what their intentions are. To be honest, I don't even know how to explain my anxiety. But I was just sure that something very creepy was going on here. I couldn't stop looking at the kids. I swear I blinked at least 100 times, trying to convince myself that this was another nightmare. Doubts tormented me until one of the aliens smiled. It was just a smile, but at the same time it looked like an evil grin. For some reason, he nodded, still grinning. I immediately had an irresistible desire to stop looking, close my eyes, turn to God for help, diligently saying prayers. I just shut my eyes and prayed, out loud, as never before in my life, about my salvation, which seemed to last forever. Finally, I decided to look in front of me, slightly opening my eyes. Everything was gone. And after about an hour, the dogs and I finally calmed down. We were visiting relatives for Christmas. We had a great time in the living room and a cozy house, drank, and chatted about family news. In the corner of the room, there was a large, elegant Christmas tree. There was no one next to it. My husband and father were sitting in comfortable deck chairs, and my mother-in-law and I were sitting on the sofa on the opposite side of the tree. 2 pet dogs were dozing on the floor between us. Everyone present in the hall was at least 6 feet away from the forest beauty, in a festive headdress. Suddenly, the peaceful Christmas party was interrupted by a loud rustle. Our eyes simultaneously turned to the corner where the Christmas tree stood. The branches of the tree moved noticeably, then began to shake violently, as if someone invisible grabbed them by the top, shaking off the tinsel from it. Several ornaments fell to the floor, broken balls sparkled. The tree shook for a good 10 seconds. And then it stopped. Everyone present watched in amazement, unable to utter a word. The fact is that we, 4 adults, were the only ones in the house. The Christmas tree was brought and dressed up at least a week ago, so no forest creatures hiding in it could do anything like that. In addition, nothing else in the house even trembled. Neither the ringing of glass nor other rumbling sounds are completely calm. Just a tree. We hurried to check the news to find out if there was an earthquake. We went through the information on the internet, these newspapers, but there were no reports of tremors. So I have no idea what is shaking that damn tree. A couple of months ago, I was driving out of a Home Depot parking lot and saw a big truck starting up nearby. I immediately imagined what was going to happen in the next few minutes, and suddenly spoke out loud. The driver has a blue hat on his head, and he will beep twice when he turns. I grinned at my imagination, but I wanted to test myself whether this would actually happen. But what do you think when the truck left the parking lot? I clearly saw that the driver of a blue hat, and twice he buzzed the buzzer, when turning to the right next to me. My father's aunt died when I was 11 years old, leaving her property to our family in her will. We inherited family treasures and souvenirs collected over more than 100 years, and a house ghost to boot. A few years ago, she came to visit her parents for Christmas. There was a need to go up to the attic for old things. Among other junk, there were old photo albums. I suddenly clearly heard a familiar voice behind me. Remove the family heirlooms from the attic, and take them with you to your house. Put as much as you can carry in your luggage, and just let the rest down from the attic. Do it now. I didn't have enough space in my small rented apartment to store so many photos, but at that moment, I just couldn't resist the instruction. It seemed that I was literally drawn to them by an invisible force. Sorting through so many antiques stored in the attic was a laborious task. It took a long time, but when I got to the bottom of one of the boxes, I found a photo of a beautiful little girl there. A child's portrait of Aunt Jane. There's a name written on the back, but I knew who it was even before I read it. So that's what she asked me to do, and I just now was able to find this picture. After a week, a powerful tornado struck the house of my parents. He completely tore the roof off the attic. The dwelling was not completely destroyed, but if the photos had remained upstairs, nature would have treated them more harshly. Therefore, the family albums were saved. They came home with me. I made a second channel, Iceberg, performing dissections, creepy theories associated with YouTube and the internet, as well as related frightening video. Follow the link in the comments. A strange woman came out from the mirror, and she tried to rob me. Last Monday, my colleagues Rebecca, Brian, and our boss and I returned to the hotel after some work. We had a business trip. Me and Rebecca went to their rooms together, and when we stood before the doors open, I could see a strange power. In the bathroom. "Hello." I addressed the guests uncertainly, but no one answered. My first guess was that there was a cleaning lady here for some reason, and then I saw a bag with my clothes in her hands. I turned around and said about my colleague that there was a stranger in my bathroom. Then I asked this woman, "What are you doing here with my things?" But she just kept muttering something about a spare room key, holding a bag in her hands. My body was paralyzed with shock, and she was obviously also very excited about being caught stealing. And then the uninvited guest noticed that she was still holding someone else's property in her hands, after which she threw my bag and began rummaging through her white cellophane bag. By this time, Rebecca was already standing behind me, watching what madness was going on here. After half a minute, the woman caught herself and headed towards the exit, but I overcame myself and blocked her way, after which I asked a reasonable question. "What's in the package? After all, my things could be there." No, it's just my trinkets, right? I can show you here." So she did. Inside really was nothing but a battered trash, so I let her no questions asked to leave. My colleague and I went into my room and began to examine it carefully. I quickly looked around to make sure everything was in its place. The electronics are intact, standing in their places, but there was a mess in the bathroom. My underwear is stuffed into bags, and so are my outerwear. They even put my passport in there. Then I looked at the shelf and saw that this scoundrel had taken my medicine. I don't remember exactly what was going through my head at that moment, in addition, but I ran out into the hallway in an attempt to find her, and, finding no one, went down the stairs to the laundry room. Nothing. Then the surroundings of the hotel were checked, but this woman seemed to have disappeared. It was clear that there was no way to find her, so I went back up to Rebecca, and together we went to the lobby to question the staff. Looking ahead, they also didn't know anything. We went back to the room to wait for the recently called police. That there was a metal bat on the bed. It was a little bigger than the wooden ones used at a baseball game. And on top of everything else, there was a flashlight at its end. That woman must have forgotten her instrument in a hurry. However, she also left a necklace, which was found on the floor. It must have fallen out of her bag when she was in a hurry to leave the room. But none of these things bothered me as much as the loss of my medication, which I could need at any moment. The police finally arrived. They listened to our testimony, and they began to inspect the room. In the process, a rather strange thing was discovered. The sink was filled with thick pieces of drywall. None of us had the slightest idea where he could have come from there. Police officers began to examine the door and windows to understand how the stranger got here, but there were absolutely no traces. We all came to the conclusion that she somehow had a spare key, or something like that, even though the hotel staff claimed otherwise. The officer decided to leave 2 of its employees for some time to monitor the situation. After all, the woman could return at any moment, but it never happened. Everything was clean, so 2 policemen were forced to leave. Well, finally. Now you can call your relatives and tell them. Talking on the phone, I walked back and forth in the bathroom, looking at the sink, thinking about what happened. And then it dawned on me. Damn it, how else could there be drywall here? After the conversation, I went to Brian and asked him to help me remove the mirror from the bathroom wall. So we did it. Behind it was a rectangular hole, large enough for some intruder to squeeze through. I asked my colleagues if I should call the police again to inform them about the find. "You don't have to call," said the boss. "There are still 2 police cars in the parking lot." I went down the stairs and went to the parking lot, after which I told 2 policemen about the hole behind the mirror. The female cop rolled her eyes, and the young guy said, "We need to go check." We went back to the room and went to the bathroom. The contents of this niche struck us. There were pillows, blankets, cigarettes, shabby clothes, toothbrushes, and much more. This lady has been living in the wall behind my mirror for God knows how long. She could have entered the room at any moment without spending a minute on it. For clarity, I note that the space between the walls occupied about 2 feet. Police asked his colleague to take a picture of the scene and send the image to the station. Later, a character was heard. The sound of a walkie-talkie is characteristic, followed by a dumbfounded exclamation of an officer. "Damn it!" Obviously, we all packed up immediately and left here. What's even crazier is how the woman probably lived there for a while. There was a smell in this room all the time. The smell of tobacco. Then I thought it was some kind of neighbor smoker, the smell of whose cigarettes just carried through the ventilation. But everything turned out to be much more interesting. She also had access to other rooms. Holes in the walls were left after the renovation, and the hotel did not invest in it for. All the holes were simply covered with mirrors. The lady could easily hang out in the rooms of the guests when they were not there. Anyway, it was just crazy. Of course, it's up to everyone to believe or not in the story. But I was personally convinced by this photo. A strange guest came to my granddaughter. One time I watched the children of my daughter while her husband was out of town. Their eldest daughter is now in her teens, at the very moment when it's strange to have a beau. Let's call her Alice Smith. For an hour at night, I am woken up by strange noises coming from outside. I'm standing out of bed, looking out the window, and I see a boy coming out of the bushes in our backyard. There was a bicycle lying nearby, which clearly did not belong to us. The first thought that came to me was quite banal. Maybe it was a robber, but since he looked too young and used a bicycle as a transport, I thought it would be enough to scare him. I didn't want to ruin a teenager's life by calling the cops right away. I went out on the porch, turned on the light, and screamed as scary as possible, in a stern voice. "How can I help you, young man?" The guy looked surprised, but certainly not scared. He was wearing a Letterman-style jacket, rough features, skinny build. He looked like that typical bully from school comedies. Just as soon as he came out, it became clear that the young man was a couple of years older than my granddaughter. He came closer and said, "Alice is home." I looked at him disapprovingly, hoping that he would realize his rash act. In a few hours it will be dawn after all, and considering that he was met. I'm not a young lady, the guy should leave as soon as possible. And then a plausible assumption came to me. What if Alice knew about the departure of her parents? And even before the notification of my arrival, called her boyfriend for an overnight stay. It was late. I was alone with several children, so I didn't want him to approach the house. I also found it damn strange that he arrived so late, and even didn't know for sure if Alice was at home now. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" I asked her a question, but he didn't answer, but instead demanded to see my granddaughter again. "I need Alice Smith. She lives here." Yes, he knew her full name. I was a little relieved, because in my opinion, only familiar people could know each other's surnames. I said, "Stay where you are." But he started to get closer. I faced a wave of panic, instinct, and I cried out, "No, wait, stop, don't follow me." The young man froze in place without saying a word. So, I go into my granddaughter's room. Alice sleeps as if nothing had happened. I didn't want to wake her up, but the situation didn't give me any other choice. "Honey, wake up. I don't know what you have planned with your friend, but tell him to go home. To have guests at this time of day. Well, no." She listlessly raises her head and stares at me in bewilderment. "What are you talking about? What friend? And anyway, what time is it? Damn, some guy called you. Look for yourself." Confused, Alice gets out of bed and goes to the window. Her face turns pale, and there is fear in her eyes. He was really calling for me. "Yes, this young man gave your full name," I said. "Call the police urgently." Never in my life seen him. I immediately took out my cell phone and dialed 911. While the rescue service employee was asking me about what had happened, Alice pulled hard on my sleeve. "It's coming," she whispered in horror. There were also small children in our house who also needed to be thought about. So I quickly went downstairs and closed the door, shouting to the uninvited guest the story I had just invented. I asked my husband about this, Alice. She doesn't live here anymore. Leave our personal property, or I'm calling the cops. The guy got angry and started shouting that she is. She went out. Apparently, he didn't believe it, but fortunately, the police arrived quite quickly. As soon as the sirens sounded, he grabbed his bike and ran away. I clearly saw how the stranger threw his pedal transport into the back seat of a car parked nearby, and he sat down in front. Without turning on the headlights, the car sped off into the distance. The police also saw it and went in the same direction, but looking ahead, it was not possible to find him. The cops advised us to hide all Alice's data on social networks and also ask her herself. A stranger has broken into my house and is trying to find me. A few years ago, I rented a house in Northern California. The area was not far from the suburbs. This place seemed ideal in order to maintain a balance between the absence of urban bustle, living as close to civilization as possible. There were only no streetlights near the house, so it was dark at night. Only the moonlight illuminated the area a little, although it didn't bother me at all. I thought your house is a perfect place to live. It happened in the middle of winter when I arrived from work. The night was overcast, so when I drove up to the house, I could only distinguish what was illuminated by my headlights and a lamp on the porch. When I got out of the car, I smelled a strong smell of cigarette smoke. It was strange, because I had never felt it before. No one nearby, absolutely deserted street. That's why I didn't attach much importance to it, and just went inside. My shift today was a few hours longer than usual. That's why it seemed like a good idea to take a hot shower and finish my day early. After a while I woke up. We are 100% sure that I heard some noise. At first, it didn't seem surprising to me, because a friend of mine sometimes stopped here to take a quick shower after work. He also had a spare key so that he could enter even during my absence. But there was one problem. He wrote every time to inform about his arrival in advance. And this time, there was no notification sound. I reached over to the bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if there was a silent mode. The bright light coming from the screen blinded me. This was the time when phones didn't have a light sensor that allowed you to automatically change the brightness in the dark. Moreover, this particular model had such a bright backlight that it could be used as a flashlight. Squinting, I could make out that the clock showed 9 p.m. But it was almost impossible to notice the presence of unread messages. I put the phone aside and called out my friend's name loudly. A couple of seconds of silence, and I heard the sound of someone falling to the floor. After which this someone started hurriedly walking back and forth. I jumped out of bed and ran to the closet. By the time I opened the door and climbed in, the uninvited guest was already climbing the stairs. In my house, there were only 3 rooms on the second floor, 2 bedrooms on both sides of the corridor, and a bathroom at the very end of it. And only the bathroom door was open. Footsteps could be clearly heard behind the wall. At first they approached, and then they began to gradually move away. Thank God, I thought. Thank God he decided to check the restroom first. This gave me enough time to inspect the attic hatch and lower the ladder. As soon as I started the climb, the stranger had finished checking the bathroom and rushed to me. As soon as my feet were in the attic and the stairs went up, there was a crack of wood. This man kicked down the door. Judging by the steps, he stepped inside and stopped, looking around. Realizing that there was nothing to look for, the guest followed into the remaining room, but there was nothing there. I suppose the stranger thought I was able to hide somewhere in the bedroom. So he came in here again and carefully checked every corner, from the bed to the wardrobe. Fortunately, the man did not think of looking up. My position allowed me to avoid surprises. I could stop him at any moment if he tried to lower the ladder to the attic. As for the appearance, I could only make out dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn-out boots. In any case, after a couple of minutes of inspecting the bedroom, the uninvited guest left to check the second floor on the second round. A little more time passed, and I heard a loud crash from the second bedroom of the room, followed by a cry of frustration and anger. That was the most unpleasant part of the incident for me. The scream reminded me of my stepfather, who screamed the same way when he lost his temper. Eventually, he was placed on treatment due to several mental disorders, which were accompanied by sadistic tendencies. The man hurriedly went down the stairs, after which a cracking crash was heard. My personal belongings and furniture were destroyed, but I remained in the attic, fearing for my life. I wasn't sure if I could get down without causing too much noise. My main task is to get the phone that was now lying on the bedside table. And the stranger's rampage continued, so it was worth just waiting for silence to come. After a while, the noise stopped, and I began to slowly tell off the time. After the incident, it became 10 minutes. It is clear that the attacker has definitely left my house. It was safe enough to go down now. The first thing that caught my eye when I entered the spare bedroom, the attacker turned everything upside down. Apparently, in an attempt to find me, it was because of this that there was that loud crash. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I decided to use the landline phone in the second bedroom. The police have been called, now we just have to wait. Voices and some kind of fuss were heard from below. The cops finally arrived. I slowly descended, and found what was quite expected to be a terrible mess. Scattered chairs, an overturned sofa, all the books, paintings and trinkets that were on my shelves are scattered on the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen are wide open, and the contents are lying on the floor. However, as far as I could tell, the only thing missing was a knife from a wooden holder in my kitchen. The police also ransacked my house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been broken open with something like a crowbar. There were also a couple of cigarette butts at the fence and a piece of foil, along with an empty case from the handle. According to the police, people often use such devices to consume something forbidden. There was every reason to believe that the offender spent some time watching my house, ready to strike. Now it was clear where this was going: the smell of tobacco smoke. The cops collected evidence and told me to spend the night with my family or friends soon. But I had a better option: not to sleep at all. I rearranged the bookcase so as to block the elephant, and spent the next couple of hours cleaning up the mess. The surroundings were checked by me every half hour using a powerful flashlight. But the man never showed up. The next day, I called the repair company to fix the door for me and installed it. Alarm system at every door of the house. I also laid a cable to the attic and bought another landline phone. I don't want to stay there without communication anymore. However, nothing else has happened in the house since then. It's been 3 years, but no news about this criminal. There was no sound. By the way, another precaution that seemed useful to me is specialized training. To be more precise, several dozen times, I rehearsed getting out of bed quickly and laying out the attic stairs as quickly as possible. Hide in case of intruder penetration. I did not leave a feeling of fear even after moving to a new home. Even there, I trained my high-speed shelter in the attic. A strange stranger on the porch of my house. About 10 years ago, after graduating from high school, me and 5 of my girlfriends, all classmates, decided that we would rent a house together right near the campus. Our modest home was not in the best area of the city. So, one evening the guys came to visit us. Nothing crazy, just not. We all hang out together on the porch, drink and chat about various trifles. The party lasted late. Already in the dead of night, about an hour or two, our friends went home, and we went to bed. The next morning we wake up to a loud stupa. Knocking. A man's voice declares that it is the police. We quickly go down, panic of course, and think that there are some problems. The officer says that something strange happened on our porch last night. At first, we thought that the policeman knew about it. The fact that guys came to us and we drank. But no, the conversation was about something else entirely. As it turned out, a man in his 40s or 50s was peeking through our windows. The officer said that the night was passing by when he saw the man who was watching our house. A suspicious guy saw a police car, immediately grabbed an empty beer can thrown near our porch, sat down on one of the chairs left outside, and pretended to drink. The police found this behavior of the man strange, so they stopped to see what it's really happening. The officer asked the man if he lived there, and he replied, "I'm just a friend, and we all just broke up." The girls went to bed, and I decided to finish my beer before I left. The gloomy dude even started describing all of us with a terrifying amount of detail. So the stranger watched us for a while. I'm sure the officer suspected that something strange was going on when he offered to take the man to where he lives. He hesitated a little, then began to insist that he be given the opportunity to finish his beer, convincing the cops that he would get home on his own. So the policeman simply ordered the man to go with him. When a search of the detainee was conducted at the police station through the file, and his identity was established, the cops found many accusations of committing criminal acts. But the worst thing is that the man turned out to be a lover of children, for which he was repeatedly brought to justice. Thank God, we were lucky. We were saved thanks to a passing police officer. After a conversation with police officers, we checked our windows. They were all open. A bandit who settled on our porch would have no problems trying to get into the house through a window from the windows. Since then, we have become much more cautious about the outside world around us. The policeman gave us the name of the criminal so that we could find his data along with all the charges. And this man looked quite intimidating. Everything that has happened still gives me chills. We had a rest once in our youth on the street. Lake in tents. I woke up at night and couldn't sleep for a long time. I got out of the tent and wanted to sit on the shore. It was beautiful there. Suddenly a man emerged from the water, quietly so without a splash. He came up to me and asked me to smoke. I remember he stank terribly, but not with alcohol, but with something incomprehensible. I told him I didn't smoke. He turned around and climbed back into the water. He dived and never surfaced again. It was a bright night, I would have noticed. Later I found out that it was a local drowned Tolik. At the end of the working day, an alarmed wife called the office number. With children at relatives on the farm. Come soon, we can't find the youngest child for half a day. The last time they saw him by the river, muttering something to the boss on the move, rushing to the car, forgetting, as it turned out, even the rights with the documents for the car at work. On my arrival, thank God, nothing happened. The kid, exhausted by the sun, just fell asleep in the tall grass, not far from the shore, where the older brother by 4 years was selflessly throwing stones at the passing ducks. And although they passed by that place several times, shouting, calling him, the baby's sleep turned out to be strong. The old chain dog couldn't figure out for a long time what he wanted from him, and when he finally finished, he found the loss in a couple of minutes. The child had already woken up by that time. When the excitement subsided, came to himself, the wife has puzzled me. How did you get here? Did you come by car? But I called you at 16.00, it's 18.15 now. It takes at least 7 hours to get here by car. How did you get there so fast? And really, how so? I remember very well that most of the way I was moving along the clogged Friday M4 highway. I didn't overtake many people, I didn't exceed the speed, although I was very anxious at heart. Later, for the sake of experiment, I did the same route in the same direction, but at night on an empty highway. Squeezing everything out of the car, grabbed for letters of happiness from the stationary radar arrows, but was able to reduce the travel time by only 60 minutes. 6 hours, how did I get there in 2 hours last time? When I was a kid, I was kidnapped. Now I am an adult young guy. I remember well one incident that happened to me as a child, and I want to tell you about it. My mom got hooked on illegal substances after her divorce from my father. She hardly cared about me. At the time of that dangerous incident, I was about 6 or 7 years old, so my understanding of what is happening may not be quite meaningful. Immediately after the successful completion of the unpleasant event, I began to live with my father, having lost contact with my mother forever. It happened in the 90s. One night my mom and I were driving. I wasn't sure if this trip was necessary. I didn't understand why the two of us were going somewhere. It was already night. In a sleepy state, I don't even remember getting dressed and getting into the car. I can't say exactly what time it is on the clock, but I guess it was very late, because there were very few cars on the road. I soon fell asleep in the back seat. I woke up from a jolt when the car stopped and the door slammed loudly. My mother drove up to some dilapidated house, standing apart from other housing. And it seemed that she had left me in the salon forever. Suddenly the car door swung open. Someone grabbed my arm hard and yanked me out, instantly tearing me away from the passenger seat. I started screaming and crying out of fright, but the man who grabbed me looked straight into my eyes and said hoarsely, "Be quiet, don't try to escape." He had a huge disheveled beard, and he looked like a madman. I was scared to death, so I immediately fell silent when I heard him. The bandit held my hand tightly. He quickly slammed the car door and walked down the street with me. I looked back at the house where Mom had disappeared. I hope she comes out and saves me at the last second. I looked back as long as I could while the man dragged me further and further away from this place. When we walked down the street, I wanted to cry with fear, but I was in shock. I just didn't know what to do. If I sniffed or started crying, the man would tighten his rough grip and yell at me. I can't even put into words how scared and confused I was. We circled the streets for a bit and came to an unfamiliar place. It was a bunch of buildings, nailed together in a terrible neighborhood. They hurriedly entered one of the high-rise buildings and climbed the stairs. My legs and feet hurt like hell, but I was too scared to stop moving or complain about the pain. Went up another flight of stairs when I saw on the side of a strange floor guy smoking a cigarette. Then, without warning, this kid rushed to us. The bearded man fell to the floor. It all happened so fast. I didn't understand why this man fell to the ground so quickly. But the next thing I remember, the guy started to fuck the man. The bandit immediately disconnected. The guy with the cigarette, as I mentally called the stranger, grabbed the kidnapper by the jacket and threw him down the stairs. You have no idea how scary and painful it is to see an unconscious person fall down the stairs. He left a red trail behind him everywhere. To this day, I'm still afraid of falling down the stairs. I still have no idea how the guy standing on the playground guessed that I needed help, but I'm glad that he decided to intervene. Maybe he accidentally noticed tears in my eyes and just realized something, or he was in a bad mood, but he acted instantly. For a second, without hesitation, he attacked my abuser. The guy with the cigarette started walking back and forth, clenching his teeth and clenching his fists, as if silently cursing at himself. I thought he was mad at me and started crying. The stranger looked at me and said, "Okay, calm down, don't cry, just shut up." "Shut up," I said. He had such a sullen expression on his face and an angry voice that I immediately quieted down, obeying him out of fear. I was so much afraid, like a bearded bandit. The guy started asking me questions. "Why are you out so late? Where are your parents? Why are you talking to strangers?" I was so shocked and confused that I couldn't respond properly to this person. Respond to his questions correctly. He asked if I knew the way home. I told him no. He told, interrupting at every word, the story of what had happened. Somehow, with the help of information, which I provided to him, he guessed where my mom's car was. The only thing I remembered about the way back was that we passed a house with Christmas lights, despite the fact that Christmas was already over. I think my savior knew the area well enough and understood, out of this confusion, where I needed to get to. But honestly, even I don't remember telling him about Christmas lights. Anyway, the guy told me that he would take me back if I promised not to tell anyone about this meeting. Over and over he kept saying that I didn't see him or anyone who he looks like him, and made me promise not to tell the police anything. Such a demand in exchange for a promise to return me to my mother. I didn't care. I agreed to do everything he asked. I just wanted to get home as soon as possible, so I nodded my head in silence. I followed him down the stairs. The bearded robber was still lying on the floor at the foot of the stairs. The man didn't move at all. I guessed he was dead. The smoker casually stepped over the motionless body, and I followed him. We went out of the entrance to the street, and my savior looked around in panic. I remember how he explained his behavior to me. The police don't like me very much. They moved away from the building, avoiding the light of street lamps. My legs still hurt a lot. The guy was walking fast, and I had to jog after him to keep up. I started crying, and he turned to me, asking what happened. I confessed to him, "My legs are no longer holding me. It hurts me to catch up with you." My escort visibly frowned, clenched his teeth, and suddenly lifted me up, awkwardly hugging me with both hands. He walked along the road in silence for a while. Then I remember how he cursed and ran behind the house. There's a building behind the wall. A police car was driving along the road. The guy gently lowered me from his arms and pushed me forward, ordering the cops to run. I tried to do it, but my numb legs barely moved, refusing to obey my will, and I was very afraid to fall. The car quickly drove away before I got a few steps closer to it. The police patrol continued its route without noticing me in the dark. The guy whispered, cursing himself, when he again took me in his arms and ran down the street. He took me several houses away, hiding from every passing police officer. But we were still moving in the right direction. Now I assume that at that moment the police were already looking for me all over the streets of the city. Tired guy continued to carry me in his arms. He quickly ran down the road, and finally I saw my mother in the car. The police surrounded her. The stranger let me go and told me to go to them alone. I was so happy that I even forgot about the pain in my legs. She just disappeared in an instant. The guy easily pushed me in the back and instantly disappeared into the night darkness. I ran to the car, and the worried mom grabbed me by the police. She lifted me up into her arms and hugged me tightly to her chest. The police officer started asking questions to me and the parent. I don't remember their contents very well, but I heard my mom telling the cops some complicated story that just didn't make any sense. She also asked me not to say anything, and I did not tell the interrogators many details of my nocturnal abduction and unexpected rescue, but I cried continuously, pouring out a waterfall of tears. We went home and didn't say a word about the night's incident, as if nothing had happened. Mom suggested to forget about everything. A few days later, my father took me to his house and immediately realized that something was wrong with me. I told him everything in detail, and he never lived alone with his mother again. When I grew up, I had time to think about this situation well. I never wanted to forgive my mother. Not so long ago, I asked my father what he remembers about that incident, and Dad told me what he thought really happened. From the information he received from me, those moments that I revealed to him many years ago, such a picture has developed. My father said that my mother started using illegal substances, visiting brothels. I was kidnapped. Someone came to help, but the person who helped me had a warrant for detention. And he wasn't angry at the little boy at all. He was just confused by the situation he had to deal with. Imagine that you are a criminal on the run, and now there is a kidnapped kid with you, and you have just beaten the real kidnapper in front of his eyes. If the guy had been detained by the cops on the street with me, he could have been in jail for a very long time. When my mom lied to the police, I was shocked and confused, and could not tell them that this man had saved me. Because while all this was happening, I didn't even notice that he was helping me. Thanks to the stranger who protected me in a difficult moment. One day, a friend of mine had a wonderful idea to take a walk in the woods at night. We took the train to the nearest station, and from there led the way to a small village. It took me 10 minutes to freeze, get tired, and be disappointed in this adventure. After some time, a cemetery appeared on our way. Passing by the fence, I saw my grandmother sitting at a table next to the grave, about 5 meters away from us. The only thing that surprised me was that it was cold outside. The nearest village is an hour away. And the most important thing is that this grandmother forgot at all at night in the cemetery. We had a lot of questions, the answer to which she was able to give us. She raised her head, looked at us and disappeared. We still remember it in great detail. For the third night in a row, someone insistently rings and knocks loudly on the door. The previous 2 days, I hid under a blanket and didn't open the door. I thought maybe the apartment was mixed up or the collector is looking for someone. And tonight, a prolonged scratching was added to the knocking. Still, I decided to come up and look through the peephole. And there's no one there. Only the neon lamp flickers. I'm in shock. The next morning, I met a neighbor on the playground. Shared a story. The neighbor said that every full moon, this happens on the floor. They got used to it. I was in a strange city on business, rented a one-bedroom apartment on the cheap. The owner said that a crazy grandmother lived there. Now she's in a nut house. Well, whatever. I went to bed at night. It's uncomfortable, like some kind of whisper. It's scary. He covered himself with a blanket over his head. I have a dream that from the mirror, which is hanging in front of the window, there is an old grandfather with a little girl by the hand. When she reaches the window, the girl turns to the bed where I am and begins to yell directly. I also yelled and woke up. I spent the next couple of nights with the light on and looking for another apartment. I came home for the weekend. Went to sleep in the room where ever lived parents and mother to the next. Both have televisions working, so in order not to interfere, the door between the rooms is tightly closed. We went to bed. I hear mom got up, walks there, limps, because her leg hurts. I hear she went to the kitchen. She came to my door, thinking maybe he wants to come in, but he's afraid to wake up. I say loudly, "Mom, why are you walking there? Come in," and I'm awake. Silent, moved away. I get up, open the door, she's asleep. Sleeping, well covered. Scared to fall asleep. When I was about 9 years old, I played catch up with the boys in a 2-story barrack-type house. The house was under demolition, and it had wooden floors, which were removed. And only the beams remained at a decent distance from each other. And now everyone has already gone outside. I was left alone on the second floor. I'm running, jumping on these beams, and at one point I didn't calculate my strength, jumped, and I feel that I can't keep my balance. I started to fall, said goodbye to life, as far as it can be done at 9 years old. And the moment I realized that I was a con, some force picked me up and put me in my place. I crawled down to the first floor with fear, sat on a bench and sat in horror. I never told anyone. Since childhood, I have been hearing footsteps behind my back when no one is around. This is not the echo of my steps. The frequency of steps does not match, shoes do not match. For example, I hear the click of heels when I'm in sneakers. Sometimes the attendant is slower than me, and then periodically runs a few steps to catch up, sometimes faster, almost catching up and slowing down. I can't hear in the crowd, but I live on the outskirts, and it often happens that I walk along the road all alone, or rather, not alone. I have never told anyone, except for early childhood, when they wrote off a rich fantasy. Now I'm afraid that they will send me to a psychiatrist. Resuscitation. Night duty. Filling out the log. I see a man at the end of the corridor, tall in black pants and a t-shirt. To my question, "Where are you going?" Silently he went to the toilet. 10-15 minutes have passed, it doesn't come out. Then it dawns on me that we don't have patients walking on their own. Everyone is chained to the machines. The door of the intensive care unit was closed at night. I went to check. There was no one in the toilet. It was fucking creepy. A patient died in the morning. They say I saw death, but I still don't understand what it was. Never spend the night in the room where the deceased person lived on the first night. My great-grandmother died practically in my arms. After that, they did everything that people usually do, believing in superstition. They closed the mirrors, opened the windows. My great-grandmother lived in my room, so I decided to spend the night already on the same bed. I dreamed something strange. A dark room where there is another being besides me. Looks like a human, but with red skin. He tried to strangle me. I woke up. I think I'm going to dream about this. And then, someone grabs me by the hair and puts me back in bed. And again in the same dream. It happened several times. I woke up when I killed this creature in my sleep. It was hard to breathe. Turned on the light on the pillow of my shock of hair. And there are signs of suffocation on the neck. Relatives did not tell. I slept in my room only after 40 days. He sometimes comes to me. Walks down the corridor at night. Drops some of his things, because there is a sound. But there are no fallen things. He opens the door a crack and sits down on my bed. He's not scary because he didn't do anything wrong. It's just that for some reason he's drawn to my bed. He just sits down and seems to be looking at me. At such moments, I usually cover my head, because it seems to me that if I look at him, something terrible will happen. And recently he was playing the piano, very beautiful, performing a melody vaguely familiar to me. I live with my mom, and she once admitted that she also hears something periodically. We moved many times, but he always came back to me sooner or later. I do not know who he is, but for some reason he is very dear to me, like a native person. Sometimes I would like to hear his voice and talk to him to find out what kind of ghost has been haunting me for 10 years. I rented a one-room apartment on the first night when I went to bed. In the kitchen, which is behind a weak partition from my room, all the appliances began to shake. Mugs, plates. The washing machine is turned off. Nothing is shaking in the room, only in the kitchen. It was wildly scary. I turned on the light, the TV, put on headphones, and turned on the music. The following night, everything is calm. Well, I forgot. I met a girl, we met, and after a while, she stayed with me. Shiramura. She sleeps on my shoulder, and I can't sleep. I haven't slept a wink all night. Then, in the middle of the night, she wakes up, looks at the partition from the kitchen, and asks what kind of people they are. I'm looking at no one. The next morning I asked her. She remembered everything and described in detail who she saw. Then I met with the owner of the apartment and asked about the former owners. After her story, I fell out. Her description exactly matched the description of my girlfriend. I decided to test it on a friend. He had to go to work next to my house in the morning. I offered him to stay so that he could get there in the morning without traffic jams. But the pro feature of the apartment didn't say anything. And he shone to the girl. In the middle of the night, the text I saw in the morning, he wrote that he was going home and would tell me everything later. At a meeting, he talks, sleeps, opens his eyes, and sees a plump woman of 60 years old looking at him near the partition. He stood up, and she disappeared right in front of him. He never went back there again. The former owners are a husband and wife who died in this apartment with a difference of 1 day. In 2004, my family bought a private house. Mom left to prepare the house for moving. Cleaning, cosmetic repairs. I went to bed late as I tried to finish the repair as soon as possible. A few days later, she calls my dad and me and tells us in horror that strange things are happening in the house. Namely, exactly at midnight, the radio starts working, interference at maximum volume. Disconnecting from the outlet does not eliminate the problem. All the windows someone's knocking. And the most terrible thing is that there are cages hanging on the wall in another room, which has my mother's bed. My brother was engaged in breeding parrots and left them there for a while. So, these cells start hammering into the wall with all their might. The whole Shaba is angry for about 10 minutes. Then everything stops as abruptly as it started. And so it went on for 3 days. My mother was unbaptized then and did not believe in mysticism. Grandma called, she said a prayer. On the same night, exactly at midnight, everything starts again. My grandmother lost her way 3 times when she finally read and said the last amen. There was silence. We didn't live there for long. In the room where everything was happening, first my grandfather died on the sofa, and then my dad died on the same sofa. The house was taken away for debts, as we could not pay the court. I was interested in the fate of the new tenants. Friends said that the whole family was drunk. See also carbon monoxide stories from school, or creepy stories that are 100% true.